Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation for the AMPS Heritage Conference about past and present built and social heritage. The title of this talk is A Walk Through Ancient Egypt, Modern Incorporations of Historical Themes. This presentation is done by myself, Renee Lamb. I'm an assistant professor at the School of the Arts, Virginia Commonwealth University in the United States. But currently I'm a US scholar through the Fulbright program and a visiting professor in Egypt, in Cairo, at Helwan University, where I have been working with my co-presenter, Dr. Reem Elasfory, who is a professor and head of the advertising department in the Faculty of Applied Arts at Helwan University. Unfortunately, Dr. Reem could not be with me for the presentation, but she asked for me to share with you all that this topic of the Egyptian civilization and how it gets reflected in patterns and brands currently is one of her deepest passions, trying to find ways to build on the beauty of the Egyptian civilization and bring more value to it now. So unfortunately, she cannot be with us today, but I'm excited to be here and to speak for both of us. So let me tell you a little bit about what our talk is and our idea and how it came into being. So as I mentioned, I have been in Egypt for this year on a US Fulbright grant teaching at Helwan University. And it has been quite an amazing experience for me. This is my third time here, but every time it just gets more and more magical. So I've had the joy of working with Dr. Reem this year, co-teaching with her, working alongside her. And when we found this conference, we said, what can we do together to present and speak to this wonderful experience in this country and culture that we both so love and adore. And our idea was to talk about the use of motif. This is something that her and I both naturally gravitate towards. It's something that is very present in Egypt. Motif has a very deep history here. There are motifs, designs, patterns that go back millennia that are still used today. And so we were curious in asking this question about how does modern day branding, visual merchandising, and product development incorporate specific ancient themes within the modern Egyptian context? How is this being done in a way that possibly creates more beautiful spaces and products? And is it being done in a way that helps to connect modern day Egyptians and modern day travelers to the country's past and culture? So these are our two hypotheses in our research project. We had this idea a few months ago and decided that we would tackle it through both a qualitative and a quantitative manner. So it's really a mixed method study. We conducted a survey, which I'll talk more about in a little bit, but we conducted a survey that went out to both expats and Egyptians to get some numbers back about how people perceived certain brands, certain current brands, and what they were doing in the marketplace, and to ask these questions to them, to get some real numbers behind our study. We also have been interviewing companies here. I'm going to talk about 4 specific companies or case studies that we looked at. We've been interviewing those companies, looking at their merchandising, looking at their branding, and looking at their product development. So let me walk you through the 4 companies that we examined. The first one is a company called Mix and Match, and I'm going to start by showing you some ancient motifs that echo what they currently use, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the company. So I want you to take a look at this slide. Here are some images. These are all images that I've taken during my time here. They're from various places throughout Egypt. This upper left image is from a tomb in the Valley of the Queens. The center and upper right images are both from the Valley of the Artisans. All three of these are from Upper Egypt, down around the Luxor area. We have jewelry here in the Alexandrian Museum that's Pharaonic period, I believe from the Middle Kingdom jewelry. This star motif, bottom to the left, second from the left, is very important. You see it echoed a lot. In the slide that you just saw, that was one of the oldest uses of it from the Saqqara necropolis here close to Cairo. This image is from a later Middle Kingdom tomb. So it spanned millennia within the Pharaonic period in Egypt. Center image in the bottom is an Amarna period coffin, that's Middle Kingdom, currently in the Egyptian Museum. Note the coloration and the patterns that you see. Look at it a little more closely in a bit. But note these colors because they'll come up again. A tomb painting, bottom second from the right, a tomb painting here at the Saqqara necropolis. And then all the way bottom to the right is a beautiful 4th dynasty, so very old statue, also from the Saqqara necropolis, currently in the Egyptian Museum. So take a minute, note a few simple things. A lot of these, if you've been to Egypt or if you've studied Egyptian art, will be familiar to you. The use of profile, the stance, a very beautiful straight posture, the flowing pleated fabrics, the jewelry formation, the use of stars, the red, the blue, the gold, which will come up in our survey. So this is to give you an initial exposure to some ancient historical motifs that we will see again in our current brand. So let me tell you about the first brand we looked at. It is an Egyptian clothing company called Mix and Match. They're based here in Cairo. They have multiple stores. They have been around for approximately 25 years. And this was the collection that I walked into when I first came to Egypt a year ago. It is based on Pharaonic imagery, and you can very clearly see in their product over here on the left. It's very small, but if you can see the patterning, the beading of the necklace, it's very similar to the necklace that we saw in the previous slide. The chevron pattern in the quilted coat, the blue, the red that you see in the product, all very reminiscent of those images that we just saw. You also see in the center image that Pharaonic imagery of the wings, the scarab beetle, the sun, so important within Pharaonic imagery. And then all the way to the right, there are those stars again, beautifully painted in blue and gold. So you can see here that Mix and Match is using historical and ancient motifs in their product, in their visual merchandising, and in their branding. And when we talked with Mix and Match, they are an Egyptian brand. They are very proud to be an Egyptian brand. And so Egypt is very often the inspiration for what they do and how they design. But they were very clear that that is not always the case. So this current collection was in stores for about a year. And this was very strongly based on Pharaonic imagery. Other collections that they've done have been more loosely based on other parts of Egyptian culture, but we looked specifically at this one because it dealt so strongly with very clear Pharaonic imagery. So that was our first company that we looked at, Mix and Match, clothing company, men's and women's apparel. The second company that we looked at, let me show you these ancient motifs one more time to get them back in your brain, is a jewelry company here in Egypt called Azif Fahmi. Some of you may have heard of this company. She has beautiful boutiques all around the world, but it is an Egyptian-based company. Since they do jewelry, I wanted to show you a few images of Pharaonic jewelry just to get your brain in that mode. So our upper two to the left images are the same. All the way to the right, you see an image of some jewelry from, it's currently in the Museum of Egyptian Civilization. Note the gold, note the serpents on the bracelets in the back. Note the use of discs, note the use of cording. We'll see this again. The necklace on the bottom left, it's small, but if you can see the beautiful beading of the necklace and the inlay into the gold. We'll see that echoed in what we see next. Again, similar motifs in the other images on the bottom, but I added here all the way to the left an image of something from King Tutankhamun's tomb, gilded in gold. This would have been where his canopic jars were kept. Keep this image in mind as we go forward. So there we go, refreshing our perception of the ancient motifs, and let's look at Azafahmi. Here are a few images from her of her product and of a store. This is the store in Zamalek in Cairo. It's in one of the most affluent neighborhoods here in Cairo. So you can clearly see that serpent motif coming back through in the product here in this set of beautiful gold earrings. And I apologize, I keep saying beautiful. That's not to set you up. I just can't help it. So the center is a cuff. These are both from a collection that she did specifically about pharaonic art, using pharaonic imagery within. In that center arm bracelet, you can clearly see, again, the use of the wings with the scarab beetle in the middle holding the sun. Very common pharaonic image. You can see the stars on top. At the bottom of that cuff in gold, you can see an eye of Horus. You'll see that come up again. And several other images that echo what you would see within an Egyptian tomb, within that tomb decoration. The style of how this is done is very similar to that necklace that we just saw. The idea of small images pieced together, telling a full story, very reminiscent of Egyptian hieroglyphics and how they were written. When we look at the visual merchandising, Azafahmi's visual merchandising is very clean. It's very modern. But what I want you to note is that use of blue. This becomes very important. Blue is a color that was extremely important to the ancient Egyptians. It was used to show status. Also, if you have ever been to Egypt and you have an idea of the Egyptian landscape, that never-ending blue sky. Very important, always present. So Azafahmi, known for using historical imagery within her product, within her branding. She speaks a lot about how Egyptian culture influences her, about telling that story of Egypt and who Egypt is through what she does. So in her in her brand, it's very important. And in her visual merchandising, a little less clear. It's a little portrayed in a slightly different way than we'll see in the other companies, but still that use of blue, the use of the interlocking motif behind that box in the window display, the use of gold, very important. Our third company that we looked at is a soap and linens company. So we're crossing industries here. Before we look at that company, it's called Nefertari. Let's go back to our ancient motifs. So here we go again, showing you some different images. You can see that box of Tutankhamun down now on the bottom left. Note it, it will come back up. The beautiful white cotton in the upper right image, cotton or linen, very important for the ancient Egyptians. In that center image, I wanted to add this one in because you can see that Eye of Horus again. This is a papyrus from the Egyptian Museum. So let's take a look at Nefertari and how they incorporate these historical motifs. So here we go. Upper left is a product display. You can see they've taken something like that Eye of Horus and very clearly put it on their product packaging. An image of the pyramids is there. So Nefertari, also a very proud Egyptian brand. They do Egyptian made, Egyptian sourced soaps and cotton products such as towels and such. You can see in their website all the way to the right, very proudly Egyptian. They very strongly use that Egyptian imagery within their branding, their product, their visual merchandising. Their website, the full website reads as if it's on a rolled papyrus. The name itself, Nefertari, speaks to an ancient Egyptian queen. The use of the blue and the brown, very important within the Egyptian landscape. And right here, front and center on their website, an ancient tomb painting. In the center image, again, you see a very clear representation of that statue pulled right off of the box from Tutankhamun's tomb. Reproduced, obviously, not an original, reproduced and standing proudly in the window. So while Asif Fahmy and Mix and Match take the motifs and incorporate them in a more modern translation, Nefertari takes the motifs and uses them in a much more literal way, such as taking the statue and putting it in the window, such as taking the Eye of Horus and putting it on the product box, such as putting the website on a piece of papyrus. Please note that because it will come back up in our research results. Our last company we looked at is called Merhez and Crema. They are, so let me show you a few ancient motifs and themes to get your brain thinking about furniture. Here we have on the bottom right, a traditional headrest. Note the shape, it will come up again. Again, Tutankhamun's box for his canopic jars, that use of gold, the proportions, the clean lines with the slant. In the upper center image, note the rectangles at the bottom. Seen very, very often, they're also in the upper right image, representing the false door, in so important and so common within ancient Egyptian tombs, this use of the false door, this mirroring or echoing of rectangles and boxes, which represents the false door. Other images I've pulled here, a jewelry box in the center bottom from the Middle Kingdom, some hieroglyphics to give you an idea of how the shapes would be put together. That's from Unas pyramid, that's 4th dynasty in the Saqqara necropolis. And then all the way bottom left, a beautiful earring from the Egyptian Museum of Civilization. Again, note the slant of the sides and how it goes from small to large at the bottom. And then let's look at Merhez and Crema and some of their products and merchandising. Here they are. So again, this is from his line where he really pulled on, specifically and intentionally pulled on pharaonic motifs. All the way on the left, you can see his dining table, how it was set up in the showroom. This was from his lookbook. So this is how he represented this table to his customers and his clients. You can see a very clear and literal representation of the sun on the back of those chairs with the arms coming down, a common pharaonic image, the use of gold, that center image. Think back to that headrest we just saw, very similar shape, the sloping top, narrow at the top, wider at the bottom, the sun right above it, and that use of gold. On the right, in that armoire to the right, you have very clear use of stars, circles, and animal imagery, just like you would see in a tomb. Again, done in gold, pulling on that ancient use of gold. So Merhez and Crema, again, they use pharaonic and ancient historical themes and motifs in their product very clearly, as we can see here in their visual merchandising, as you can see in their store setup, and in their brand. They talk about how they want to use a unique flavor of tradition. They adopt a variety of styles and they pull from Egyptian history very intentionally, especially ancient Egyptian history and mythology, to tell the story of who they are as an Egyptian brand. So there we go. 4 Egyptian brands, different industries. We have apparel, we have jewelry, we have bath and body care, and we have furniture, all using ancient historical motifs and themes within their current product, visual merchandising, and branding. So let's talk a little bit about our survey and what our results were. So our survey went out to 51 people. Here are a few numbers for you, mostly female. About half, a little more than half Muslim, 30% Christian, a little more than half Egyptian, some American. What's important here is that whether Egyptian or non-Egyptian, everyone that we surveyed either has a college education or is working on a college education. They all speak English. The survey was done in English. And anyone who was not Egyptian that we sent the survey to has international experience. So they've traveled or lived abroad. This was done through voluntary sampling. So we sent the survey out to students at Helwan University and then to different expat groups, both within Egypt and abroad. Let's see what they said. Traits they most often identified within the images that I showed you from these 4 companies were the use of gold, the use of religious imagery like gods and goddesses and icons, and the use of linen or cotton. So this was really interesting to us because it shows how people currently perceive ancient Egyptian culture and the images that they associate with that culture, the use of gold, gods and goddesses, and linen or cotton. Of course, linen or cotton, depending on the company. So for our first hypothesis, does the use of these historical motifs make the product more or less beautiful? I want to stress all of these companies focus on creating a high quality product. Even with that, you can see here across the board, the majority of the time, people said the use of historical motifs made the product more beautiful. Nefertari had the lowest percentage, but even then it was half. So half of respondents said that yes, it made the product more beautiful. For mix and match, you can see that it was clear, right? 92% of people said the use of these motifs made the product more beautiful. So the way mix and match is doing it obviously resonated with the final customer. The way that Nefertari was doing it resonated much less. Keep in mind, mix and match incorporated it much more delicately. Nefertari incorporated it much more literally. Thinking about our second hypothesis, or how does the use of these historical motifs connect modern day Egyptians and modern day travelers to the country's past? We wanted to ask about both brand engagement and cultural engagement. And so when we asked about brand engagement here, you can see we have kind of a mix. For mix and match and Azafahmi, people felt like the use of historical motifs increased brand engagement. But that was much lower for Nefertari and Merhes Krema. Again, overall, maybe with the exception of Nefertari, it seemed to be positive. With Nefertari is the one where really it was very literal, and for 41% of people, it said it made them less likely to engage. But when we think about the Egyptian culture as a whole, for every brand, more people said that the use of historical motifs made them more likely to engage with and connect to the Egyptian culture versus less likely to engage. So these numbers give us some important conclusions. And I want to stress our N is only 51. So we're only at the beginning of collecting survey results, and these numbers may change over time. But initially, this is what we're finding, is that the incorporation of historical motif really needs to be a part of the brand identity and the brand story. If it's taken too literally, it's not going to resonate with people in the same way. But interestingly, even when the use of historical motif did not create more connection to the brand, it did create more connection to the Egyptian culture. So ramifications for an Egyptian company who has a mission of strengthening and embodying that Egyptian culture within what they do. It seems to be very important for connecting to the Egyptian culture, even if it's not building brand engagement. And in all cases when historical motif was used, the majority of people said it helped them to perceive the product as more beautiful. So always helping to make that product be perceived as more beautiful. So some implications for this would be to take this research further, to explore if there are differences based on consumer nationality, to really break that out and see if Egyptians say something different than non-Egyptians, which could be useful for companies when thinking about who is their target customer and how exactly do they speak to them. Do they need to speak to the local Egyptian customer in a slightly different way than the expat customer? And something that my co-presenter and I would like to explore more is, carry over into other cultures? What if we take this to speak to the use of motifs from the Moroccan culture or the Celtic culture or Indigenous American cultures? How are these things perceived in the marketplace? If you have ideas for how we can take this research and expand it, please feel free to share with us. As I mentioned, we're only at the beginning of this research, and we would love to collect your feedback, your thoughts. If you would be interested in taking the survey, please feel free to send me an email and let me know. I'm happy to share it with you. So thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you being here. We're excited to be a part of the AMPS conference. Again, here is my email, rslam@vcu.edu. If you have any thoughts or feedback or questions about this presentation or this topic, please feel free to reach out. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.